Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to work on what's an integer. And when you see things written down on the screen, you're going to want to copy them down on your own paper. And then we'll be putting this note sheet in our notebook at the end of the lesson. So first off, we have to learn about integers, but we have to learn about numbers that we already know about. And the first set of numbers that we already know about are actually called natural numbers. Some people call these counting numbers because when you count, you start with number 1 and you go to number 2 after that, and then 3, and then 4, and then so forth. These 3 little dots, this is called set notation when we have these fancy brackets, and each number goes in between a comma, and then when you see 3 dots together, it means this pattern is going to keep continuing on and on. In math, we love to study patterns. So guys, that's natural numbers or counting numbers, some people call them. The next thing we're going to talk about is a set of numbers called whole numbers. And whole numbers are very similar to counting numbers, but we include the value of 0 first right here at the beginning. So please fill in 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4 like we did last time. But again, this pattern continues, and that forms the set of whole numbers. So before we get to our definition of integers, we're actually going to talk about opposites for a minute. The opposite of the letter A would be negative A. The opposite of 2 would be negative 2. And the opposite of negative 15 would be 15. So it's important we understand the opposites of numbers because our definition of integers includes the set of whole numbers. So I need you to fill out the word whole right here. And I'm going to put it in red ink because I think red ink makes it stand out better and it makes us realize, hey, this is important. And the set of whole numbers, when we put them together with their opposites, forms the set of what we call integers. So integer is the topic that we're learning about. And you might have seen a list of integers before. There's actually a list up on the front of my smartboard. And in that list, you're going to see a bunch of numbers going down this way. These are your negative numbers. And we'll just kind of have the dot, dot, dot start with negative 3, and then negative 2, and then negative 1. And then what we have to remember to do with integers is we have to include the 0 in the center between your negatives and your positives. So after 0, we can start counting up, 1, 2, 3, and so forth. And then with the number line, we're going to see the negative numbers counting down this way. So to fill in the lines in your notes, on a number line, the set of integers has the number 0 in the middle. We have positive numbers to our right, and we always put our positive numbers there. And we have our negative numbers to the left. So we want to fill in all these blanks that I have for you, so that we have all the information that we need for the first math page of our notebook. So what I did below this little passage is I gave you an actual number line, and you might notice in the center, this little center line is a little bigger than the others. That's going to be more helpful for you to find out where 0 goes in the center. Here's where we start counting up with our positive numbers, okay, and this arrow means it's going to keep going up if we had more room. And then we're going to head to the left, which is where our negative numbers go. So we're going to start counting negative 1, negative 2, negative 3, and so forth, okay? So we need to talk about how many negative numbers are there, how many positive integers are there. Well, guys, that's why I have Buzz Lightyear up at the top of your note sheet. There are actually infinitely many positive integers that exist. Okay, so remember, Buzz Lightyear says to infinity and beyond. Infinity is the idea that we can count bigger and bigger and bigger and never really get to the biggest number. We also need to fill in what we know about how many negative integers there are. And guys, it turns out there are also infinitely many negative integers. Now what you're going to do down here at the bottom of the page on your note sheet is you're going to circle the numbers that you see that happen to be integers. Okay, remember integers are only whole numbers and they're only going to be positives and negatives. Okay, they can't be decimals, they can't be fractions. So that means we can't circle this one and we can't circle the fraction. Okay, but this is a integer. It's the opposite of 17. We already said 0 is an integer. This one's a little tricky because it says 20%. And if we didn't have the percent sign, it would totally be an integer. But because it's talking about 20%, percents are parts of a whole, so this one is not an integer actually. What I'm going to have you do now is I'm going to have you take a look at the sheet that is to the right. There is a set of practice problems where it says in your own words. You're going to define integer, and then you're going to do some practice problems, all talking about integers. So I'm going to pause my video to give you time to do those questions, and you're going to do the same if you're working at a computer by yourself with this video, and you're going to answer those questions, and then hit play, and we'll go over the answers together. Okay, so here we are going over the answers to our first set of questions. To define in your own words what an integer is, you want to say something about whole numbers and their opposites. And for question 2, you want to have circled the whole numbers, like 43, and 10 would be a whole number whose opposite is negative 10. These things are either decimals or fractions, or pi is an irrational number, and it's not considered an integer. So you should only have those 2 circled. 3 integers that are between negative 2 and 2 would be negative 1, 0, and 1. And this one's a little trickier because there's actually a lot of integers in between negative 20 and negative 2. So as long as they exist on that number line between negative 20 and negative 2, you're right. I just chose the 3 closest to negative 20. There's negative 19, negative 18, negative 17, but you could have even said negative 3, negative 4, and negative 5. The next thing I asked you to do is read each situation and see what kind of integer represents the following. You really have to pay attention to the clues, whether it should be a positive number or a negative number. Earning $15 is a positive 15, but 14 degrees below 0 is a negative 14. A loss of 20 yards is negative 20. Above sea level is positive 250. Gaining 5 pounds would be a positive 5. But below sea level would be a negative 100. So one last, be careful when you're doing these because again, certain words are going to clue you in whether it should be positive or negative. Now for some practice with opposites. The opposite of a negative 231 is a positive 231. And the opposite of a 1096 would be negative 1096. Now, at the bottom, you have a question that's kind of strange because they're talking about earning money and spending money. And originally, Jenny only has $2, but then she earns $5. So sometimes we want to draw a little picture on this, okay? If she has $2, that's a good thing, so we'll draw it pointing up. She is going to get $5 more, so that tells us right now she has $7. Now, I know this can't really happen, but what if she was to spend 10? Okay, all $7 that she spent is now gone, and she's actually going to owe somebody $3 because 10 minus 7 is 3, right? So then she earns $4 at that point. So if you think about it, she can pay the person back $1, $2, $3, and how many does she have? She has $1 at this point, positive $1. And then the last thing says she spends $3. So from this point, we have to go down 3. And if you think about it, if she was to spend 3, she went down to having nothing. She went down to borrowing 1, and she went down to borrow 2. So that's why I have a negative 2 on my answer blank. So please check your answers. We're going to cut our notes at this point, and we're going to put them in our notebook. Thanks for watching.